Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Grand Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Grand Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Grand Group by emailing thegran, G-R-A-N, group at edinarealty.com or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Grand Group with Edina Realty, 3-time Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners. On this episode, David and Dan recap the Twins' 3-game series against the Seattle Mariners. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis. With me, as always, is Dan Thompson. The Twins score one more run in total than the Mariners did in the 3-game series, and that was enough for the series victory. Dan Thompson, I don't know that I've ever seen it where a team loses 5-0 and then wins the next game 5-0. It just seems very bizarre, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly this felt like a series that the Twins could easily have lost, and it would give a very different tenor. I think the key was game 1, right, where the Twins were able to hold a lead, because this would have been a disappointing series, I think, to lose, given as well really as the Twins pitched throughout the series.
Yeah, it was a good outing, definitely, from the starters for the most part, especially considering sort of the other factors at play with our current guys in the rotation. But yeah, I just kept looking at those numbers and I couldn't believe how few runs were scored, like from each side in these 3 games.
And each game had a tipping point that I thought it really could have gone either way.
Yeah, so let's just jump right into the series recap here, Dan.
Series recap.
Game 1, Dan. This one was a tight game. This was tense. The thing is, it's late, Dan, right? It was a 9-10 start. I was tired. I wanted to go to bed. But how could you go to bed like this, Dan? Twins are on the cusp of victory. They come away with this one 3-2 in very dramatic fashion to end it. Bottom of the 9th, Dan. I don't know if you were on the edge of your seat, but I was on the edge of my mattress, if I'm going to be honest. I had moved to the bedroom, but I had it on my phone, and I'm just like tense, Dan.
Well, so when they play the Mariners, I can't watch it through the MLB app because I'm blacked out. So I'm listening to Corey Provis. And so I'm at the mercy of Corey and Dan, which I'd much rather be at the mercy of Corey. Let me tell you, if I want any detail and any punchy, anything really accurate.
The count or like what happened after
anything.
After
Why
the
did they
ball
give the
makes
middle
contact?
innings to Dan Gladden? Can't we just hear Corey the whole game? Why did they feel... Anyway, really interesting. I mean, an interesting game because they only get 4 innings out of Archer. And he looked good, but, as we read in The Athletic, there was a good article talking about how the Twins are being incredibly careful with Archer and trying to ramp him back up so they get a full season out of him. And it's hard to argue with that system when he's pitching with a 3.35 ERA.
Yeah, when I read that article by Hayes, the only thing was I was sort of left thinking, this kind of seems like he's going to be this way for a while, right? Like, we're not going to see Archer pitching 7 innings in the near future.
No, I agree with you there. And maybe he's the guy that they might stack, a Josh Winder with when he's back, even a Bailey Ober. I mean, I guess we'll see what they do. But in this game, the Twins bullpen comes through after that. Thielbar comes in, pitches an inning, then Jax, Cotton, Smith, Duran, Pagan. I mean, they used pretty much all of the big arms here, and it worked out.
And maybe that led a little bit into what happened in game 2, but we'll get to that. We do need to note, Buxton had a home run in game 1, right off the bat in the top of the first, and this is fresh off of his being named AL Player of the Week.
He's almost to his career high now, I believe, in a single season home run with 18.
Well, and so we have to note this stat because this is pretty amazing. So Buxton against the starter for the Mariners, Flexen, after that home run was 6 for 6 with 2 doubles and 2 home runs. That's like Kepler against Trevor Bauer. Like when he went on that stretch where he had like 5 home runs in a row. Yeah. Like it's like, what is going on? Like, how do you deal with that? One, do you think Flexen knew that? Like, you have to think Buxton knew it. I'm sure Flexen did too, but you have to think in Buxton's mind at the plate, he's thinking, oh, well, I got this. And Flexen's mind is like, I don't want to do this again. I don't want to do this again. And so I was a little surprised about one, Jack's only pitching 1 inning here. I thought that he would pitch a little bit more because he only threw 12 pitches, so I thought they might give him another inning, but they went to Cotton, Smith, Duran, and then Pagan. And I do have to say, Dan, Pagan pitching in the bottom of the 9th. It's late, right? I'm sleepy. I want to go to bed, but I want to see how this game ends, so I can't go to bed. Dan, there was a solid 8 minutes between each of those pitches that he threw in the bottom of the 9th inning, and I'm like, dude, please just throw the ball. Ugh.
I think Provis started talking about the weather. He started talking about the last time he visited Seattle. still, there was a lot of filler in that ninth inning when you would think they would have kept it going.
On to game 2, Dan Thompson.
All right. So the Twins get shut out for what is the 9th time this season. It's the most in Major League Baseball, which I wasn't surprised by it because I've felt it, but I'm surprised that the Twins with this lineup have been shut out that many times.
I assume you didn't go deep in and like look at the rosters to see who was out on the IL during those shutouts, Dan?
Oh yeah, I did a big, deep analysis, David. It was my whole afternoon, actually. I looked at all of those box scores. But the problem here for the Twins is that Joe Ryan pitched okay, but the 2 big home runs doom him. One was right after a visit from Wes Johnson, so that obviously didn't work.
And embarrassing. I mean, you got to think as the pitching coach, if you go out there and the very next pitch, your pitcher just gets rocked to left field, it's got to feel not great as the pitching coach, you would think.
No, and there were moments in this game, where you thought the Twins could have gotten back into it, but they were 0 for 5 with runners in scoring position. There were no big rallies in this game for the Twins. Kepler grounds into a double play. They didn't have enough spots where it really even felt like they were going to win this game.
No, and I do have to say, Dan, I hate doing this, but I have to give credit where credit is due. Dan had mentioned in a previous podcast about how it just felt like the Twins were always being run on, and the Mariners proved you correct. Dan, let me tell you, they stole 1, 2, 3, 4 bases. That's a lot of stolen bases in a 3-game series.
Yeah, and in this game, the 2 that Moore stole, I don't remember if he scored on both of those situations, but he did score 2 runs in the game. It's obvious here that the Twins are not a great threat to throw people out, and they're going to keep getting run on. Also, another note about the Mariners here. So their starting pitcher, Gilbert, now is 7-2. I believe he's only given up 1 run in 11 innings against the Twins, and he's up to 9th in the league with ERA 2.22. And again, this was what was so strange is that the Mariners seem to have capable pitching. I mean, you look at the names on this roster. I don't know how they're this bad.
Gilbert looked like the real deal, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't like the Twins just looked inept. I mean, they looked inept, but it wasn't because they're not good players. It was because Gilbert was just superior in this outing.
But then luckily we look at game 3 and the Twins righted the ship, and another game that really could have turned on just any number of plays.
It's crazy when you're watching a game and the first runs aren't scored until the 7th inning.
Yeah.
Right? Like your whole game, you're just waiting and you're seeing, okay, who can make that first impact play? And thankfully it was the Twins, and they just kept the pedal down, Dan. They didn't let the Mariners come up.
Well, and I'm sure Ryan Jeffers was the first name that you would have picked if you would have said, hey, he's going to make the biggest impact. He has the big RBI. And then the Twins were able to pile on more runs late in the game. Big play, though, for me, I think it was maybe the biggest play of the game, was Gio Urshela's play in the 7th inning, barehanding a ball. So to set the scene, the Mariners got runners on first and second, nobody out. Then I believe it was Moore popped out on a bunt attempt to Miranda. And then on the next play, there's a slow roller up the third baseline. Gio Urshela barehands it with like his fingertips. It makes a beautiful throw across the diamond to get a guy there. So instead of bases loaded, it's second and third with 2 outs, and the Twins were able to get out of the jam.
Urshela, what I like about him too is that he had a couple of different hits in this series. Not hits, excuse me. He made contact to the third baseman, and the third baseman had 2 pretty good plays for the Mariners on Urshela hit balls, and you could kind of tell that Urshela took it personally, like he was offended that someone who plays his position would get him out. And I just like that sort of chip on his shoulder, not in an outward way, but you could just kind of tell that he was a little bit frustrated that that's how he caused the outs to accrue.
And there were spots, I think one of those was with Urshela running out a ball where it would have been a double play ball, and they avoided that. Miranda did that in another situation. Really crediting the Twins with their effort here too. And then I think the biggest offensive play of the game is Luis Arraez's opposite field single to score 2 after actually there was a wild pitch in there that set up the guys in runners in scoring position. But man, he is so fun to watch. And the YouTube announcers sure were on the Luis Arraez train.
Well, they were so upset that the Mariners first baseman was ahead in their little poll that they did for All-Stars. So they were like, France is up in this poll, and they were both just flabbergasted that Luis Arraez wasn't winning 100% to 0 against all the other AL first basemen.
It was another one of those games that's on a one-off, so it's on YouTube. And it was maddening to hear them try to talk about these two teams that, I mean, I'm sorry, but mainstream media are not paying a lot of attention to the Twins and the Mariners.
No.
And here we were again trying to talk it up. They were talking about doing the flying fish at the Seattle market. Like, they hit so many of those stereotypes of visiting Seattle. It was just, I wanted to pull my hair out.
My favorite mispronounced name has to go to them talking about Sonny Gray and how they replaced the Twins ace Jose Barrios. I was like,
it's like he's still playing in baseball here. He's a great pitcher. Like, how do you mess that one up? And Arraez, I feel like they added like 5 syllables to his name a couple times.
There were like 3 or 4 E's definitely in Arraez's name.
We do need to give credit to Tommy Watkins sent Celestino, and it worked.
Just so you know, I even put this in the notes to give Watkins credit. However, had he not sent him, it would have been first and third, one out. So it was a good
I liked
send.
it though, because that's a double play away in a close game, and maybe he knew something about the Mariners outfield, because obviously Tommy Watkins, if there's one thing about him that we know, he does his scouting reports and he takes those things seriously.
Very, very seriously. So to end game 3, Dan, YouTube, the most important thing that they did, Dan, was name the player of the game, which they gave to Luis Arraez. And in his post-game interview, though, they gave him a trophy, which I gotta be honest, if Luis Arraez puts that in a trophy case somewhere, I mean, I gotta think Luis Arraez probably has several trophies, right? Like, I'm sure that he has several awards that he's accrued through his time playing baseball. But the player of the day, because you played on YouTube, I'm just thinking that trophy is probably not at the precipice of his awards shelf. But the quote was worth it, right? Like, he deserved the award more for the quote than for his play, I'd say. But so Luis, in talking to the interviewers after the game, says, "My dad said, hey, if you hit it to left field, you make a lot of money." Like,
and you win some trophies too from YouTube, apparently.
But anyway, so a great quote from Arraez, absolutely in that one, and I'm so happy he has that award now, Dan.
All right, well let's move on here towards our next segment, Puckett's Picks.
Catch 'em all, Kirby Puckett!
Puckett's Picks winner.
It's weird, Dan, because I didn't win and you didn't win. So who reads the stats? The listeners come away with the victory.
I know. They win for Arraez. I feel like the listeners have had Arraez a lot lately, but it paid off here. So he has 6 points. Buxton, thanks to 2 strikeouts in game 3, fell behind for me with 5. And then Correa, a solid 3 for you, David, I would say.
Yeah. Well, in a series where there's only, where there's 8 runs scored by one team and 7 by the other, I mean, those are decent numbers, right, for Puckett's Picks?
And then, so as far as the season standings, you maintain a lead with 8, and the listeners have 6, and I also have 6. And I'm gaining, though, on the listeners in the season points here. Well, I guess I by definition, did not gain on them in this one, but I'm 7 back from them, and you are 17 back from me. So there's something, I think it's going to work itself out. It's going to normalize, David, and I'm going to get a couple wins here in the next couple series.
I do feel bad, though, that, like, no one's here to pump up the listeners when they get a victory, right? Like, you and I are both just sort of ho-hum about it. But so Hogs is going to be on the podcast in the next couple of weeks here, and I'm sure that he'll make it known if the listeners come away with a victory.
All right, well, let's move forward here to Beast versus Bench.
Beast versus Bench.
Is losing fun? Is losing fun?
This is going to be a little bit of an oddball choice, and I'm sure Hogs will have something to say about this here. I'm going to go with none other than Griffin Jax as my beast here, David. I'm going to go with a relief pitcher. I don't know that I've ever done this before.
No, that's normally reserved for your bench spot, Dan.
I know. That's why it's
recently.
such a great reversal. So in game 3, he struck out 2 of the 3 guys that he faced. And then in game 1, he struck out 1 of the guys. So he had a pretty much almost an immaculate inning. I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But Griffin Jax, David, is 4-0 on the season. And we both, dare I say, didn't even think he was going to be playing with the Twins this year, but he's turned into a really valuable middle reliever.
So it's funny that you picked him because he had 2 outings, Dan, and that's not really your MO when you pick a relief pitcher.
I know, but so I'm really happy with what he's become, and seriously, a credit to the Twins for finding a spot for him, because he looked lost as a starter in many ways there, but to be able to convert him into a long reliever, but now he's only pitching 1 inning outings, like it's almost like they're building up to be like an end of the bullpen kind of guy.
That's been a little confusing to me, right? Because I thought that Jax was definitely going to be used as that long relief guy in, what's his name? Well, I had to think about this for a second.
Were you trying to say Tyler Duffy?
Randy Dobnak is who I was trying to recall, but it's been so long since we've said that name on the podcast. But anyway, I thought Jax was sort of going to be his replacement, to be the long relief guy. But it does seem like he's going to be more of a traditional 1-inning type guy, which if he can be effective and even more effective that way than in a long relief role, the Twins aren't gonna turn away any relievers who are giving them 1 solid inning in a game.
No, because they need that right now. Who's your beast?
Yeah, I got to give it to Arraez. It wasn't a great game 2, but nobody had a great game 2, but he played well in the field, and he had a very good game 1, and obviously was pretty much responsible for the victory in game 3. Yeah, there was another great article by Dan Hayes at The Athletic. Man, Hayes is getting all sorts of shout outs from us this episode, but he did a write-up about Arraez and finding strength in his leg. legs and how he worked out with Nelson Cruz. It was a really good read and just shows the dedication that Arraez put in to keeping himself healthy and trying to make it so he's going to stay on the field for the majority of the games this season.
Well, and then moving to bench, we're in agreement here. It's got to be Trevor Larnach, right?
It was hard to pick somebody, and you didn't pick a reliever, which is shocking to me. I don't know. I'm just so used to that being sort of your
they
your
pitched
bit
really
now.
well. The bullpen had a great series.
But so Larnach was 0 for 6. He played in 2 of the games, and I don't know how much this would have really stuck in both of our minds if Kirilloff wasn't breathing down his neck, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later.
Well, first of all, in this series, nobody else really seemed to have a bad game because the guys who didn't get hits played really well in the field. Larnach's going to have to be better than this, I think, if he wants to hold Kirilloff off, and he's kind of the specter that's sitting over this roster right now.
We were talking prior to recording a little bit about how this roster, there's probably not going to be a lot of movement outside of when Winder comes back and maybe Ober comes back. But other than that, this roster is looking more and more sort of set in stone, and Kirilloff is really the odd guy out at this moment.
Well, we'll talk more about him after a little bit. Let's go to the rewind.
Rocco's Rewind.
So I got a question, Dan. Thielbar in Game 3 threw 4 pitches, got 1 out. Couldn't you throw him out there for another inning? And then Duran, he's gone 2 innings before. He only had 13 pitches. It worked out, right? They won Game 3, so I can only be so critical. But to me, some of these high leverage guys in the bullpen, you can get a few more pitches out of them. And I think if this game goes a different direction, you would have liked to get more length out of them. So I guess I'm pleading with you, Rocco. Give these guys a little bit more of a leash, especially when they get the outs that they needed to in such a short time frame. Give them a couple more pitches.
Well, so one thing with Thielbar, so he pitched the end of the 7th inning, and then the Twins scored 3 runs in the top of the 8th, which was a pretty long half inning, and so I've got to think that it was because of that. I don't necessarily mind it, because I think he's brought in to face a certain guy in that situation. A little surprised maybe to round, but then at the same time, then the Twins added another run. It's 5-0. They got Pagan at least starting to warm up a little bit. Again, like you said, it worked out, so it is really hard to criticize that, especially with the day off coming.
Well, and you make some reasonable points. Like, I don't want to just dismiss those. I guess I'm just thinking, in this point, it'd be great to get the series victory. If Thielbar is still hot, put him back out on the mound. Maybe you don't even need to burn Duran, or maybe you don't even need to go to Pagan, whatever the situation may call for.
And that's fair, and we'll see kind of how that works out against Arizona. I'm going to also talk about kind of some bullpen management. So getting through Game 2, as I'm watching this game and I'm seeing how the Twins just look pretty impotent offensively, I was just really glad they got through that game with only 3 pitchers. So Joe Ryan only goes 4 2/3. McGill comes in and gets an inning and a third, and then Moran is able to pitch the last 2 innings. They don't have to pitch the 9th, which I thought was actually really important here because they didn't have to go to anyone's other guys. So we've talked recently a lot about Rocco playing to win the next game. This is a perfect example of him doing that, and it actually working out really well because they needed those arms in Game 3.
Well, we had so many of those moments last season where we said Rocco manages losses very well. It's one of his best qualities as a manager.
Well, let's go into the Minnesota moment.
Minnesota moment.
Yeah, I got to go with Pagan's save in Game 1. And as annoyed as I was with how much time he took between the pitches, I was so happy to see the Twins not blow a late lead in such a close game. It's just one of those things where we're so used to it as Minnesota fans, especially Twins fans. That just seemed like a game the Twins were likely to lose. And so to see them close it out, it was a very big moment. And I was very excited for how late at night it was, Dan.
Well, the other thing is that you got to remember they're playing the Mariners, which if there's any baseball fandom that is more long-suffering than the Twins, it's the Mariners. And I think they would say the same thing as you, David. Well, they just kind of expected to lose. Like, this is the kind of game that the Mariners lose, too. They've been at, I think it was more one-run games than anybody else in the league. So I'm going to go into mine here, which I'm going to look at Game 3 here. And this is Luis Arraez's 2-run single. And a couple things about this. And the YouTube people, first of all, pointed this out. Luis Arraez fouled off a ball that was low and away. I think it was a low fastball with a full count, and then he gets that opposite field hit. And they were talking the whole at bat about how he's going to go opposite field. He's going to go opposite field. I mean, what a great moment to see the team's best hitter making his case to be an all-star in a big moment late in the game. He comes through.
Well, and the pitch that he fouled off too, that was definitely outside the zone. Like, he could have let that go. Yeah. It was definitely going to be a ball, but the catcher almost hung on to it. Like, it was a foul tip, and the catcher, he made an effort because he knew how important it is to limit the number of pitches that Luis Arraez gets to see.
Sure, and I was happy he was swinging because Jose Miranda, as good as he's been lately, I'd rather Luis Arraez is batting with guys in second and third than Miranda coming up with the bases loaded.
No question. No question. If you're a betting man, you take Arraez every single time, Dan. That's not even a comparison. Like I know it was nice of you to say, but nobody is going to disagree, Dan.
Well, but honestly, in that situation, if you're the Mariners, do you not just consider walking Arraez to load the bases once you've got guys on second and third so you can face Miranda? Like, I don't think that was crazy with a right-hander on the mound.
I just don't know how it can get any better.
Mauer's musings.
We alluded to it a bit earlier, Dan, so why don't you start us off?
Sure. So the Kirilloff question obviously lingers. He hit a grand slam this week for the Saints. He's hitting it's like 600 or something down in AAA. I mean, he's really playing well. I think it's closer to 400, but he's been fantastic. And with Polanco not playing this series at all, I just wonder, first of all, is Kirilloff going to come up for this Arizona series and Polanco is going to do an IL stint? Because they've talked about how Polanco's back is not really it wasn't feeling worse, but it also wasn't feeling better. And I could see a scenario here. You want Polanco on the field, but if Polanco goes on the injured list as a precaution as much as anything, you move Arraez to second and first base opens up and you got some at-bats for Kirilloff right there, or you give Larnach a couple more days. There's ways, obviously, that could work in a way that it wasn't maybe going to work if Carlos Correa goes down. Positionally, it works better.
I don't have a problem with the logic of it happening. It would just surprise me because Polanco wasn't put on the IL already.
What's your musing?
I was doing some stat dives, and I was looking at particularly the offense of the team because Twins Twitter after the game 2 were just not thrilled with the offensive performance, as you can imagine.
Sure.
0 runs, 0 for 5 with runners in scoring position, whatever the other stats may be.
How was it when the wind was blowing in from right field? It was swirling over center field like a vortex. Did you get that stat?
Not those kind of stats, Dan
Okay.
Thompson. No, but so every sort of major statistical offensive stat outside of stolen bases, which we talked about last episode, the Twins are a top 10 offense in the league by just about every measurable that you could look at. So the real question becomes, Dan, is this team capable of making the postseason with their pitching constructed the way it's currently set up?
I think it's capable of making the postseason. I don't know that it's capable of making a run in the postseason. I do think they're going to need to pick up 1 or 2 bullpen arms. I'm not so sure about starters because depending on who's available, you're going to overpay so much to get a starter down the stretch. I'm not sure that it's worth sacrificing the next couple years in some sense. They're going to need some relievers more than they need a starter.
I would agree with that. So one note I was going to ask, but I think the answer is obviously no. But reading those articles about who's going to be available at the deadline and Nelson Cruz's name came up, it would be so fun to see Cruz return to the Twins, but there's just no space for him. The way that Rocco's been using the DH, you're not going to sacrifice, a Buxton or a Correa at bat for a Cruz at bat because you'd rather have the higher average of Buxton or Correa over the power of Cruz because both Buxton and Correa have that power capability as well.
Yeah, I think, and also for as much as other players talk about Nelson Cruz's influence on the team, I think he's already done enough, I would say. Well, in the sense that Miguel Sano,
yes.
I mean, he was the reason Miguel Sano kept playing baseball. Now he's the reason Luis Arraez is hitting balls opposite field. What are we going to hear next?
Yes,
did Joe Ryan get some inspiration from Nelson Cruz too during as their ships pass in the trading deadline night?
The way,
sorry, what else?
The way that I understood what you were saying, I thought you were talking about with the Nationals. And so I was confused, what you were saying. So now I understand what you're saying. But I'm glad we got that waxing poetic from Dan Thompson about Nelson Cruz's impact on current Twins players.
I mean,
and any chance you get to bring up Miguel Sano.
I feel maybe Nelson Cruz is still actually managing this team through text message. Maybe he's still doing that.
It's a shadow management. He's just got some. Oh my goodness!
All right, we got to grade the series.
Series grades.
Well, I'm going to go first, Dan. Look at this. I'm giving them a B. They won 2 out of 3. You had both Gray and Ryan coming off the IL, making their first starts. You did what you could. Archer gave you a decent outing, but no more innings than you would expect out of Archer at this point. I don't know. I was pretty happy with the series victory. You're away from home. You seem a little bit down on this series, though, Dan.
I think that's it. I'm just disappointed by this big fat 0 in game 2. And I'm just disappointed by a lot of the big fat zeros that the Twins have produced this season. I would have liked to see them muster a little bit more there than the 4 hits in the middle game. And they end up winning the series, and that's great. But I gave them a B-. I didn't feel quite as good about the series maybe as you did.
So how much do you think where you're living currently plays into this? you're living in Mariners country, so maybe you get a little bit more amped up for these series, Dan, where it's hard for me to do so.
I was feeling like I was a little bitter that I wasn't able to go as school was finishing up and I couldn't go. And I'm even getting texts from people who I know who are at these games, some of them who don't even care about baseball. Like they're over there. I'm like, can't you could come and teach my class for a couple of days while I go to some baseball games. So yeah, maybe that factors in a little bit.
You throw To Kill a Mockingbird at the students and then you walk out of the room. That's all you do, Dan.
That's
right?
all teaching is, David. You just read this book and then you storm out.
All right, well, let's keep pushing, Dan. Herbie's headline.
I don't know, Jack. It looked like Herbeck pulled him off the bag.
Herbie's headlines.
So Miles Michaelis for St. Louis, he's a 33-year-old pitcher. He pitches a near no-hitter, which you know how I love no-hitters, in the second game of a doubleheader. So first of all, earlier in the day, he's like at the zoo with his kids, which I love, right? Like, he doesn't even need to be there for the first game. And he comes out, and his line, David, is 8 2/3, 1 hit, 1 run, which I'll get to, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts, 129 pitches, which, let me tell you, that doesn't happen very often anymore that they even let a guy in there. The game was out of hand. The Cardinals were up 9-1 in the 9th, but so the Pirates had gotten a run earlier on. It was an error. A guy reached on, and then he kind of just got around the bases through your traditional ways, like a ground out, things like that. But I really felt for the guy because this is the kind of outing that I really long to have, like a complete game. And then here's the thing, he didn't get to finish the game. They pulled him before the final out. Like, come on. Can't you just let the guy throw a couple softballs up there?
129 pitches, though, Dan. His arm had to be feeling it.
That's a lot of pitches. So anyway, good on Miles Michaelis. I'm sorry he didn't get the meaningless no-hitter, but what a great game nonetheless.
The meaningless no-hitter. I knew you'd sneak it in somehow. I knew you would make sure to make it known that you don't care about no-hitters somehow. All
right, well, you talk, because this other concept here is one we haven't discussed much.
No, so an immaculate inning, for those of you who are not really in the baseball world, is basically where a pitcher pitches 9 pitches in an inning, 9 strikes, 3 strikeouts. And this happened for the Houston Astros in a very odd way because it happened twice in the same game with pitchers Luis Garcia and Phil Maton. They both threw immaculate innings, 3 strikeouts on 9 pitches in the same game against the same 3 batters. I don't know.
Well, it never happened before. It was unprecedented. This had never happened.
It's just bizarre, right? Like, it's one of those weird stats that I don't know that you'll ever see again as long as baseball happens. What are the odds, Dan?
It's also one of those stats where you almost don't even know that it's happening when it's happening. You could be stepping up to get a drink or a hot dog, and you come back and you will have missed one of the rarest things. It's like a meteor going across the sky, David. Isn't it, though, just kind of one of those odd stats as much as it is an impressive one?
Yes, definitely an oddball stat. Like, I doubt it's going to make Jeopardy, right? Like I'm not going to see that up in the old baseball categories in Jeopardy.
I think the Astros are going to make Jeopardy for a lot of other reasons before the 2 immaculate innings, I believe, that these guys threw today.
All right, well, with that, Dan, let's start looking forward to the Diamondback series, which you are going to be at, correct?
Yes, I'm really excited.
And we'll see you tomorrow night.
Puckett's Picks.
With that in mind, folks, normally we try very hard to make sure that we get the podcast up as soon as possible after the last game of each particular series. Next episode will be a day late because Dan's going to be traveling, but we thought it'd be great to have him record because he can tell us about his experience at the stadium and whatnot. So please, thank you for your patience. But so the episode won't come out until Monday as opposed to Sunday, which is normally when we try and get it out.
And you guys think it's going to be hot in Minnesota. I'm going to Phoenix, David. I know it's a dry heat, but 110, that's going to feel pretty dang hot. Thankfully, Chase Field is enclosed this time of year. So, yeah, I'm excited. My oldest son and I are going to go for his birthday and Father's Day. Hopefully the Twins can get us a sweep. Speaking of that, so the listeners here are going to pick first. They're going to take, again, Luis Arraez. Hard to argue with that. You know, he's the tried and true.
Yeah, the singles machine, Dan, as you dubbed him last episode.
I know. What about you? You get to pick next.
Yeah, so I'm going to take Buxton, and I realize that's odd. Normally in this circumstance, I've been taking Correa, but it does just look like Buxton. If he can put 2 games together, he's almost a lock for a victory, I'd say.
Yeah, this is only the second time you've picked Buxton all year. I thought about some other guys here, but I just have to go with Correa. He's the surest bet, so Correa it is for me.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a while, Dan. Barring injury, that these are not the 3 names taken during Puckett's picks. Well, and with Arraez getting all the help from Nelson Cruz, and you said something about Ichiro.
He called Luis Arraez his favorite left-handed hitter. They spent a little time before one of the games together. I mean, what an honor that would be. And again, if the Twins can get a career out of Arraez, anything like that of Ichiro with the Mariners, man.
Do you think, maybe I did notice Luis Arraez, he gave the old sleeve a little tug, I think, in one of his at-bats.
You know what? He's got a smooth swing just like Ichiro does. Couple of the team notes, David. You want to get to those?
Yeah, so Chichi Gonzalez, greatest name on the Twins roster, is no longer on the Twins roster. He was claimed by the Brewers, so there will be no more starts from Chichi Gonzalez. And then also the Braves, Dan, I just have to mention this. They won 14 in a row. So we didn't want to do a whole segment on it with Herbie's headline, but I think it's important to note, my goodness, Dan, 14 games is a lot of games to win in a row.
None of them with Eddie Rosario in the lineup. Can you believe it?
That's the most shocking part about it, Dan.
Also, we were waiting for the Cleveland game to end, but the Twins' lead is down to 2.5 games over the Guardians. So they're right there, David, with some big series coming up here in the next couple weeks.
Hopefully we can keep the lead until we see the Guardians, and then we can sort of grow upon that basis, right, Dan?
There you go. All right, how about you send us out, sir?
Will do. Well, folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on Twitter at Min for the Win and find our Min for the Win Facebook page. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast to be notified when new episodes are available. And if you could leave us a rating, that'd be great. A reminder that our episodes are now available on our YouTube channel, and if you could drop us a like and subscribe, we'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks for listening, and as always, go Twins. That'll wrap up another episode of Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.